At the end of the last episode, there was what you might call a wobble, a sort of disturbance in the force. Pierre White, the master, the Yoda of the stove, had decided to hook up for an ad deal with a British firm selling farmed turkey. And the vibe check on that was like, in a career of genius swerves, it seemed just one too far to the critics, who were used to a certain aura from the 3-star Michelin man.
It's like being given the golden ticket and then you go, what now? What's next? I'll go and advertise stock cubes and air fryers.
He was once the rock star chef, once a rebel. Now he's a big name brand. He's lent his name to cruise ship getaways, air fryers, boxed spuds, retro sauces, a sort of gourmet Deliveroo, but mainly to a burgeoning stable of branded restaurants, steakhouses, oyster houses and Italians, all with his name on the door and his pictures on the walls, and maybe a Groupon voucher if you look around. So it's hard to know sometimes what brand, what message, what vibe, what legacy we're supposed to get from Marco.
In terms of what he wanted then and in terms of what he's doing now, I think the younger Marco would be astonished to look at the older Marco. I really do.
But times move on. And at the minute, what's really interesting to me is how a new generation of fans, stoked on by Foodie Reddit and Chef Insta, are finding what I now see as late period Marco. There are a new generation of fans out there now who I've recently discovered have gone even farther down the Marco rabbit hole than me, and I want you to meet one. So say hello to Gary.
He's a massive figure and most people have heard of him, but did I really know him? Did I really understand his recipes and what he was doing and his legacy? No, I don't think so.
The change came when Gary's pal slipped him a Marco cookery course.
And from there I started to watch it and get into it and start to understand it, and then I sort of opened a real Pandora's box of all the material that he's got in the world.
Okay, this guy is talking my language. This is Gary Fenn, a talented YouTube home chef who, like me, has been sort of mesmerised.
You have to lean in, you have to understand what he's saying, you have to get it and tune in, and then he sometimes says some of the most bonkers things.
This was like I had met a pen pal in France or something. I was very excited. Anyway, Gary's main draw at the moment is cooking a load of Marco's recipes for an eager, younger YouTube fan base.
And the amount of people that comment on my videos, I could listen to him all day. He's perfect ASMR. I wish he would do audiobooks.
Like what? American Psycho?
You go all over the YouTube, you'll see the same 1,000 comments are under every video. Mostly people doing his catchphrases. He's just an interesting person.
Interesting, defiant, perplexing. In 2025, Marco is different. No longer is Marco the bollocker of men, the tormentor of the kitchen. Nowadays, he's a gravelly, sage-like philosopher of the stove.
You look at the great chefs, the great artists, they make it look so simple, don't they? They just allow it to be simple. So whatever you want to do in your life, don't overwork it, don't overthink it, and you'll realise your dream. Trust me.
Damn it, he's absolutely right. But as we know, simple can often be incredibly difficult. I'm Kieran Tracy, and this is Eat Me, Stories of Defiant Geniuses. This series, yes of course, is Pierre White, and this is the third and final episode, ASMRco. Genius comes in many forms, and often in life we have to separate the art from the artist, right? Pierre White, he isn't an easy character. He's inspiring, yes, but at times he's vexing. And yet still, people like me and superfan Gary, we keep coming back. Part of that is that we want to learn, even just a morsel of what Marco has to teach. And that got me thinking, if you were going to attempt true greatness, to try and attempt some of Marco's truly greatest work, to try and learn what it feels like to make it, what it feels like to taste it, what would you do? Well, turns out Gary had actually been mulling on this as well, and flicking through the vivid pages of White Heat, the answer was staring him right in the foot.
This pig trotter dish is very much associated with Marco, right? It comes up again and again in his history, and he has stated in at least 3 sources that I can find, it's his favourite ever dish.
Hang on a minute, a pig's trotter?
A lot of people wouldn't go anywhere near a pig's foot. Let me tell you, they don't know what they're missing. It's absolutely delicious.
And they're really meaty. What the hell? Like, you would never, honestly, like, there were so many things I'd never heard of until I went on that show with Marco. And it's like, as I said, my eyes were opened to this.
Marco obsessed over the pig's trotter. He learned it from his one-time big boss, Pierre the Bear. And he says it's so good that it's like a piece of art worthy of hanging in the Tate Museum.
Personally, it just looks disgusting. I love the little onions on it though. Look like little pig's trotter and pickled onions. It just looks very, very simple, but also pretty alarming really in a lot of ways.
Alarmingly difficult to try to make, that's for sure.
That's the thing. You can't be listening to like a podcast or watching something on iPlayer. Your full attention needs to be there.
But superfans like Gary are up for this. Why? Well, in part, I think it's for the same reason that I was drawn to Marco as well. That perhaps some of his don't give a fuck cooking ninjery might just rub off.
There's a hint, a soupçon of arrogance in the home chef as well, thinking, I'm going to give that a go and give it a try and see what it's like. See what it's really like to do that.
The secret is, first of all, you've got to learn how to bone it out. You're going to do this.
So I've seen a video.
You need to come for a stage in my kitchen.
This other dude that I'm talking to, a guy called Gary, he's going to try and do this.
Yeah.
Because it's a glorified sausage at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Glorified sausage. Easy. But the first problem wasn't anything to do with the cookery. It was actually getting the bloody trotters.
I hear from TV chefs forever. This is not a recent thing. If you just speak to your butcher and they'll get hold of this thing for you. They'll put a special order in for you. Now, from where I live, there are 3 butchers within a couple of miles, and over the years I've been to all of them to ask them for special requests. Can you order? And no, blanket.
Eventually, Gary got his trotters, and the first instruction: blowtorch the tiny hairs off and then scrape in between their itty bitty petty toes to get the last hairs out, which is obviously completely gross.
There was an odd satisfaction in doing that, just a very pleasing cleaning of that.
But then the crucial bit, getting the bone out of the trotter. The aim here is to leave it like an empty rubber glove. When we do watch the old Harvey's video, Marco looks like a trotter ninja. Like, you barely even see it happen. He just breaks
It's like he's peeling a banana.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. For Gary, though, it was a bit more difficult.
You're scraping away, and the sheer concentration. This hand that's holding the trotter eventually developed a sort of lock on it where I just held it for so long.
It sounds like when I'm chewing too many fruit pastels and my jaw kind of locks.
Well, at least you get a nice tasty treat at the end of that.
Yeah.
And so, my hand was just cold and locked in place, and I just developed a headache from doing it.
One headache done, time for the next headache.
You've got to braise it so that it just wants to fall apart. It melts in your mouth when you eat it. So you can't overcook it. You've got to cook it, braise it for at least a couple of hours.
Which is exactly where Gary's had it. So it's the moment of truth. He opens the oven, opens the heavy dish to reveal that
the entire juice of it has gone. And the pig trotter didn't look great. I must admit, I thought, I've got to start again. I've got to do it all over again. Is what the first thing that went through my head. But so I then took this out, and it looked all dishevelled and shriveled, frankly. So that's the point. At that point, I was in quite despair.
Now, I'll let you into something. The evening that Gary was making this, obviously he was filming it for his Ace YouTube channel. But during this, he sent me a picture, and it was of this kind of dishevelled pig's trotter in the middle of the plate, but there was like a gravy splatter all around it, and I initially thought that he'd put his fist through it in rage and disappointment. But Gary had soldiered on, he'd plated up, and in the end made something that I think looks pretty good. It looks pretty close to what Marco does in white heat. And then there was only one thing for it. It was the taste test. Could it be that a fan can really learn the skills of the master?
So, is it tasty? Yes. Is it worth the 4 hours of cooking, including boning the trotter? No. I think I don't need this ever again. So you said, would you make it again? No, not really. It is a fussy 80s restaurant dish. It's showing off. You know, it's not unpleasant to eat, but it's fine. Like I say, it's something to say you have done. A bit like climbing Everest. Yeah, done that. I can move on now.
The pig's trotter is, of course, one of Marco's most difficult dishes. Gary is not the only superfan who suffered trying to make it. But all this got me thinking. Marco is a master for a reason. Hours and hours and hours of dedication and craft go into the kind of skill that's needed to do that. So maybe the simpler thing, if you want to taste a bit of Marco, is to just get your coat on and to head out to one of those many Marco-branded restaurants from his nowadays eatery empire that I mentioned at the start of the episode. Now, here begins a tale, because back in the day, if you wanted Marco food, you had to go to Marco. You had to go to Harvey's or Mirabelle, somewhere like that. But when he hung up his apron, give back those stars, that was the end of that. He was done doing the cooking. Now, at that time, he took a really dim view of chefs who kept their names above the door but didn't themselves do the cooking. He often called it living a lie. Head chefs who traded on a name, charged top dollar, but they weren't really at the stove. Maybe they weren't even in the restaurant. Marco didn't like that. So it's kind of eyebrow raising, and that's like all three eyebrows in the air now, that over the last 20 years, his name has appeared over a great many doors up and down the land. We all change, I guess, and I suppose his point was about the highest end restaurants, really, where people are paying top dollar for the chef to truly be there. His chain restaurants aren't that. He does not cook anymore, and the food isn't Michelin food. It's a different era. Like the stock cubes, like the turkey, it's for ordinary people having a treat at a decent price. Like I said earlier, Mass Marco. Now, reviews of his varied establishments have ranged from the praiseworthy to the scathing. One reviewer in the Scotsman, for example, said the goat's cheese had the texture of those bits of toothpaste left over at the top of the tube, which is not really a great look for a Marco restaurant. And then there was the food critic Marina O'Loughlin, who we heard from last episode, and her experience. Back in the day, Marina, you might remember, had eaten in Marco's Mirabelle restaurant at the height of his 3-star power. So it was something of a different experience when she went some years later to his branded London Oyster Bar restaurant. Not least because, well, the day she went, the nervous waiter had to explain that they didn't actually have any oysters.
Obviously there's, and I like to think I'm less prone to this than some other critics, but there is a tendency towards hyperbole, but there was absolutely none in that review. It was truly dank. It was awful.
Yikes, how times have changed. It used to be Marco dishing out the bollockings. Now he's on the other end of them. I
just think that, for a fan, and I was a fan in the 90s or whenever it was that I was kind of around and aware of him, you feel traduced by it. You feel so let down. You feel like, well, why did I invest so much of my time and emotion? I was going to say God, but I guess, yeah.
Emotion, definitely, yeah. Food is emotion. It's what we bring to the table every time we eat. And Marco's food does stir emotions. I heard a reviewer on another podcast recently, for example, call one of his restaurants, and I quote, Wetherspoons adjacent, which, if you're listening outside of the UK, that's a sort of mega chain of bottom-of-the-market pubs.
I don't think Marco, by the way, would be offended at being called Wetherspoons adjacent, because that's just classist. There's a lot of things that are important about a Wetherspoons, and like he would say about Bernard Matthews or about Knorr, they play a part.
But it turns out there's something else Marco's restaurants are adjacent to, or should I say, someone, a superfan.
So amidst all this Marco frenzy, I hadn't noticed that there's one like 20 miles from me, a Marco steakhouse, and my wife and I had a night free, and I said, I've been doing this Marco stuff lately. Let's go to one of his steakhouses. That'll be fun, won't it? We've got a night out. That was some of the worst service I've ever had in a restaurant. I asked for a piece of steak, which is cooked fine, but it's utterly tasteless, completely bland. So I had a really, really dismal experience and had a terrible time.
That's really weird, because we obsess over this stuff. We obsess over this genius. We obsess over this journey of learning. And yet, we go out to, and we all know, it's a big franchise, hotel stuff, whatever. There's a legacy to be had there, and there's a legacy to be maintained. Mm-hmm. A reasonable, you can say, like, it just didn't live up to that kind of thing. Should it?
So you're back to the concept that you had earlier. It was like, what brand is he passing on? What brand is he working through right now? What brand is he trying to leave?
The pictures of that young man, the rock star chef, they hang over the dining tables in many of these franchise places. And you know what? It's like a rock star, because he's sort of suspended in a timeless moment that will never age. If anything, these pictures are almost getting younger and younger while time moves on. Meanwhile, commerce does its thing. Loads of ordinary diners are very happy with what they're served. But those closer to his story, slightly less so.
And can I just say, this sounds like it's a massive diss of him. It really, really, really isn't at all. I mean, I have nothing but admiration for the younger Marco, and I have full, I think, understanding of the older Marco. I understand what he's doing. I'm not criticizing. I mean, I couldn't do that. I would want in my life to continue doing something that had a little element of the cachet and the kudos and the quality that was attached to my younger self. I would want to do that, but everybody's absolutely different. And I think that if he had continued at the level of frantic passion that he put into those restaurants, he'd be dead now. He's not dead. And he seems to be living, his version of whatever his best life is.
Which does bring me to the idea of time. One of the stranger things Marco talks about in his little videos that I love is the idea of time. About everything having a natural arc of beauty and decay. Seems very grand, seems a bit much when you're casually referring to chicken stock, but it's true. He has defied much over his life, but no matter what gritty portraits are on the walls, he can't defy time. And yet, I'm going to say that time is what has actually brought out some of the very, very best in Marco. Because who would have thought that the most commanding bollocker of all would become a softly spoken sage of the stove? Well, in his most recent set of instructional videos, that is what he has metamorphosed into. And they, to me, are quite the most perfect things. They're from a series called BBC Maestro, and here's an example.
People speak of all these luxury ingredients being very expensive. Black truffles, white truffles, caviar, saffron, and the list goes on. But the most expensive ingredient of all is your time. Think about it.
Ah, damn that old salty dog. He's right again. And these videos, they are full of this. They're beautiful because everything is quiet. The only noises are his chalky voice, the quiet clacking of a knife on a board, the hiss of a pan, and every now and again a little reassuring "there" from Marco. It's funny because back in the early days he used to say he was the only person that was allowed to talk in his kitchen. But this is different. This is like we're just accompanying him quietly at home. It is like ASMR. He is ASMRco.
I felt like I was watching some of those videos and it was like listening to David Attenborough talking about a blue whale in Blue Planet, but it's Marco and he's talking about pie. He's talking about a dish. And everything's got a little bit, I don't know if you noticed really early on in his career, when he would salt stuff, he would do it with a big arm. He'd be like swinging his big arm around and it would be like this really, almost like flamboyance involved. And everything's got a little bit smaller and a little bit calmer. And I think he's achieved a level of comfort in himself, at least it certainly seems like that, where he doesn't need to perform this act of being this bad boy of food that has made headlines for so long, and now he can just be calm. And I imagine in my mind's eye he's at home and he's maybe taken up meditation and he's started to enjoy life a little bit more. He seems far happier.
And yet the focus and the discipline, I think, is actually even more crystallised in these videos.
Yeah, but it's not furious anymore, is it?
He's always harped on about simplicity, even in recipes where achieving simplicity and amplifying simplicity, like the pig's trotter, is astonishingly difficult. And there's one video in particular that I think is just the height of all of this. It's a video of him making scrambled egg. Scrambled eggs? What can I say? Just watch it and listen to me when I say this. It could change your life. It has changed mine. I adore it. And so does Gary Fenn.
Well, you know, again, we're back to the point of he makes you listen. He's really making you listen because he's got lots of stuff in there and all of it is gold. And he just says stuff over and over. Very low heat, very low flame. You can put your hand on it. Some people take it off the heat, on the heat. They don't show control.
If you have to take your pan off the stove, then you're lacking understanding in temperature. Question why you're doing what you're doing. There we are.
Just watch him. The skill with which Marco does the absolute least possible to these eggs is disconcerting. He seems to just guide them around the pan at a snail's pace as if he was water painting on a Chinese footpath, minding only the temperature of the heat. The technique and mastery that's clear from all the stuff he doesn't do is amazing. So this one video about scrambled eggs has blown me away, almost more so than all his others put together, because to me it's like the culmination of Marco's journey, the conclusive point of change from a daring provocateur of 3-star Michelin excess, about technicality, about ambition, now to a man who stands watch over no more than 6 cracked eggs, a single slice of toast and a knob of butter.
I think it's brilliant. I mean, I've seen the videos you're talking about and the way he sort of comes across and talks very elegantly about the ingredients that he's using and keeps it quite simple. I think it's great. I mean, he seems at peace with himself, whereas when I knew him, I haven't spoken to him for years and years and years, but when I knew him quite well, he was. I think he wasn't at peace with himself.
To me, and maybe to you, cookery does bring a little peace in a stressful world, although I don't think it would have brought much peace working under MPW. But learning on these little videos, it's fun and it's an insight. It's a hobby. When I first clocked him bashing out the list of what needed to be done for a fish pie, what I found magnetic was a master who brooked no opposition. Unbelievably bumptious, yes, but still magnetic. I get now that he's a mega brand, something that doesn't really seem defiant or rebellious or even that inspiring anymore. But I don't think that diminishes a single thing that he's done before. So to me, Marco Pierre White is a hero with a small h. Is he a difficult hero or is he a straight up hero?
I think he's and I'm looking at a picture I've got in front of me on the wall. So it says, normal is the cruelest of all insults. I don't think he'd be offended if I said he was a difficult hero. Because I don't think he's a straightforward hero. And I don't think he'd say that he's very straight. I think he's got a very straightforward way of looking at food. And if you put that with that and that works with that. But I think he wouldn't be offended if I said he was a difficult hero.
Thankfully, I don't regard Marco in a hero status. I'm just fascinated by the man. I think he's really interesting. I genuinely don't think I'd like to meet him because you can never tell which Marco you're going to get.
Early period, mid period, late period Marco, to me, they're all pretty amazing, really.
A person changes and they adapt and they change minute to minute, let alone from a young 20-something to being this like chill old father time. And he's grown up in the public eye and he's just a very complex character. And I think to try and boil him down to like where he belongs to be in our estimations is almost like besides the point.
our estimations, this is the thing, they're nothing. Marco Pierre White has lived the life of a master craftsman. He's as close as I can see to someone who seems admirably indifferent to either praise or criticism. Whatever you think about him or his sayings, I've kept one to last. In recent times, he started holding forth a lot on this idea of dreams. And he's saying this thing often now that if you have a dream or a goal, you have a duty and a responsibility to yourself to make it happen. Sounds trite, doesn't it? But really, doing that is probably the most defiant choice of all. It's that simple. My thanks to my guests Adele Silva, Aaron Patterson, Gary Fenn, Kirsty Bosley and Marina O'Loughlin. There were some clips in this episode from the BBC Maestro series, which I urge you to watch because it's amazing, and from Marco's talk at the Oxford Union. Same again, it's great, go watch it. Our next series will be out soon, but before that, just a quick recipe. If you like this, please subscribe. Just add 4 beef stock pots wherever you get your podcast. There's no real recipe, just cook it without colour, let nature be the artist, and most importantly, leave us a quick review. 5 out of 5 would be great. Lastly, thank you for listening to Eat Me from Big City Nights.